Antoine Leclerc did not have the appearance expected of the owner of a major bank. This man in his 40s, dressed soberly but without ostentation, exuded a certain serenity that could easily be confused with indifference. His suit, although impeccable, bore no marks of luxury. On the other hand, his gaze, calm but resolute, let the depth of his experience shine through. One morning, he went to the branch of the Banque Saint-Georges, a well-known institution in the chic neighborhood where he lived. It wasn't the first time he had set foot in this bank, but today he came for a very specific reason. He did indeed intend to carry out a series of important transactions, but he did not intend to present himself as the discreet owner of the bank. Upon entering, the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. Automatic glass doors opened to a lobby decorated with impeccable taste, but which exuded the cold. A polite, distant smile was the norm here. The employees, always impeccably dressed, carried out their tasks with almost military precision. But what was clear was that the welcome given to a client like Antoine would not be that given to a man from the dominant class of this neighborhood. Upon entering, Antoine walked towards the counter of one of the bank advisors, an arrogant-looking man named Pierre Morel. Pierre was well known for his condescending demeanor and haughty behavior towards customers he considered not to belong to his class. Although he had been an employee of the bank for years, he had an annoying tendency to view certain customers as inferior because of their appearance. When Antoine approached him, Pierre stared at him for a moment, assessing his attire. Antoine wore a dark grey suit, simple but elegant, and a modest watch, but he had none of the ostentatious presence that Pierre expected from the bank's important clients. He then leaned forward, smirking, and said to her sharply, "I'm sorry, sir, but that's not the type of transaction we handle here." Antoine raised his eyebrows slightly, but did not lose his calm. He had learned to control his anger in situations like this, knowing that sometimes discretion was the best weapon. He apologized politely, although he already had an idea of where the conversation was going. Pierre, more than certain of his superiority, told him that he was not worthy enough to do business in this establishment. He referred him to another bank, more suited to his profile. Antoine, without flinching, turned on his heel and left the bank, without another word. The humiliation was palpable, but Antoine knew it was only the beginning. He didn't want such a trivial situation to become a sticking point in his day. He walked slowly away and left the bank, heading towards a small brewery, away from stares and judgments. But deep down, the decision was already made. Pierre Morel was going to understand to his cost that arrogance would never be without consequences. The next morning, Antoine returned to the bank, but this time he was no longer just the ordinary customer he had been the day before. He took care to present himself in a more familiar appearance, almost neglected, as if to further cover his tracks. He had swapped his sober suit for a casual tweed jacket, no tie, but still impeccable in its simplicity. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had just come out of a long meeting. He knew the visual effect would be striking. He would be seen as just an ordinary businessman, far removed from the expectations of high society. Antoine walked towards Pierre's counter without a word, crossing the hall with apparent tranquility. That morning, Pierre was at his desk, comfortably seated behind a large glass window, his gaze fixed on the screen of his computer. He had not noticed Antoine's entrance. The latter discreetly installed himself in the management office, where he was rarely seen. He sat in a dark leather chair, glancing around at the cold modern decor of the room, the white walls and glass furniture. He almost felt out of place in this sterile environment, but he knew he wasn't there to blend in. He was there to teach a lesson. An hour passed in strange tranquility. Pierre, still absorbed in his tasks, was far from imagining what was going on. It was only when the secretary rushed in, looking in a hurry, that the reality of the situation hit Pierre head-on. He told him that an emergency meeting had been called by the board of directors, which he absolutely had to attend. Pierre looked up in disbelief and took a quick glance at his watch. The meeting was barely 15 minutes away. It wasn't his habit to be pushed around like this, but something in the air told him that the day wouldn't go as planned. Upon entering the meeting room, Pierre saw Antoine at the end of the table. This vision immediately destabilized him. Antoine did not have the appearance of a boss, no ostentatious tie, no grandiloquent gestures, and yet, he was there, much more at ease than Pierre would have believed. Antoine smiled slightly, a calm expression, but one which betrayed great control of the situation. The smile was subtle, almost a warning. Pierre felt a knot forming in his stomach. He forced himself not to show surprise, but a sudden warmth filled his face. He swallows hard. One of the older members of the council, a man with a hard look but full of wisdom, then stood up and spoke, his deep tone echoing through the room. Gentlemen and ladies, we have learned what happened yesterday with one of our clients. Antoine Leclerc, in reality, is one of our main shareholders and the discreet owner of Banque St. George. He has invested millions in our institution.
The room froze in total silence.
Pierre turned pale when he heard these words. He felt his heart racing and his hands getting sweaty. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. He had humiliated the one who was the pillar of the bank? Him, a client like any other, a simple investor? He bit his lips to hide the panic that was rising within him. His thoughts were racing, but all he could manage to form in his head was a single word: unacceptable. He felt trapped, cornered. Antoine, implacable and serene, spoke in a clear and measured voice. I never tried to be noticed. My commitment to this bank is discreet, but deep. What I am looking for is an institution where respect for individuals takes precedence, not a bank that judges its customers on their appearances or their origins. The bank is a place of service, not a court. Antoine paused, his eyes staring into Pierre's with an almost palpable intensity. I took charge of this bank to make it a model, a place of integrity. But if some prefer judgment to reception, perhaps it is time to rethink some things. The silence in the room was heavy, almost suffocating. Pierre, caught in the turmoil of his emotions, tried to justify himself. His voice, trembling and weak, struggled to come out. He stammered, searching for words in a whirlwind of shame and denial. I thought. But his apologies were only confused whispers, drowned in the weight of the moment. Antoine did not give him the opportunity to escape so easily. He turned to the board of directors. I propose that we immediately review the bank's policy, that we put in place mandatory training for all employees in order to eliminate any form of discrimination, conscious or unconscious. Pierre Morel, for his part, will be suspended from now on.
A murmur ran through the room.
Pierre, pale, fixed Antoine with a defiant look, but the decision had been made. There was no going back. The meeting ended quickly, and Pierre was escorted from the room. Antoine sat there, calm and implacable, an aura of serene control emanating from him. The change, he knew, had just begun. It was not a raucous victory, nor a spectacular gesture of revenge. No. It was a discreet, measured victory with dignity. A few months later, Banque St. George became a model of respect, inclusion and equality in the banking sector. Antoine, without ever seeking the limelight, had reoriented the bank towards more human values. Pierre, for his part, looked for work, but found himself rejected at every door. He would never again have his place in the banking world. He realized too late that arrogance and prejudice did not make him a powerful man, but an insignificant man in a world that valued respect and integrity. Anthony knew that true power did not reside in glory or domination. Power was knowing how to keep calm, remaining faithful to one's principles and ensuring justice triumphed discreetly, without making noise. This was his true victory.